Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining our chat. I'm Andy Watts, Master Distiller for 3 Ships Whisky. And can you believe that it's a year since our last release? There's now an hour to go before the 3 Ships Whisky 7th Masters Collection sale. And I'm incredibly excited to share this unconventional release with you. It's the 6-year-old Chenin Blanc cask finish. Now there's not many of those around. In fact, it's an African first, and one of only a handful in the world. The other unconventional fact is it is also Africa's first coffee malt. Now this is an industry term for a malted barley mash which has been fermented and is then distilled in a column still, and not the traditional pot stills. Super exciting for us. And behind me, the infamous wall, the first 400 bottles of this special release. But before I start telling you more about this exceptional whiskey, and taking your questions, of course, let's talk about today's sale format. The online sale will begin at 12 p.m. sharp. You can either access it by opening the 3 Ships Whisky sales page on a new page in your browser, or you can move to the sales page from this site at 12 p.m. If possible, I'd recommend opening a new page in your browser so you can familiarize yourself with this page before the sale starts. This year's release is selling at R749.95, and you will need your credit card to complete your purchase. Lastly, if you haven't already done so, please register for the sale right now by clicking on the Register for Sale icon on the left-hand side of the screen, which will direct you to the registration site. Now let's talk about this year's release. As you know, the whole concept of the Masters Collection started back in 2015. Yeah, I'm thinking way back then, 2015. And the idea which we had was each year we were going to bring to you something which would be different, it would be unique, it would be a limited edition, and something which we hadn't done before. And so far we've done 6 of those, and now we're on to our 7th. Now, the previous 6 have been super exciting. We've gone from opening with a Pedro Jimenez cask, single cask. We've gone through 2 red wines in a Pinotage and a Shiraz. We've gone through 2 of the sherries, my favorites in Oloroso and Fino. Last year we did an amazing double wood which was based on the Amontillado sherry. And now this year it's the Chenin Blanc, a white wine finish. And if we look at this year's 6-year-old, it really is, it's firstly the youngest in our Masters Collection series. And we thought that coupled with the interesting finish which the Chenin Blanc cask was giving us, that to make it younger would be more conducive to an easier drinking, softer, #summer uncorked experience. In terms of the distillation, I mentioned that this was a coffee malt, as we refer to it, and that is also very, very different. It's a case of taking that mash, which comes from malted barley, and then instead of traditionally distilling it in copper pot stills, the idea was to put it through the column still, which will give you a slightly finer, lighter style of spirit, which then would obviously take on the nuances of the Chenin Blanc cask finish a little easier. It was also a move away from the traditionally heavier single malts and blends which we've had up to date. So this one, in terms of our legislation in South Africa, we have 3 categories. We have the malt whiskey category, the blended whiskey category, and then the whiskey category. So the fact that we've taken this actually malt mash and we've distilled it in the column still puts this particular release into the whiskey category in our South African legislation. It was 4 years in older American oak and then moved across into Chenin Blanc casks for that final 2 years. Obviously, South Africa, warm climate, we talk about this a lot. It gives us that accelerated interaction between the wood, the spirit, and the atmosphere during maturation, leads to a higher angel share, but also helps us to extract the flavors and marry those flavors with the spirit at a much quicker rate. So yes, 6 years in total, but in terms of our climate, you can maybe put 1 or 2 on top of that. The end result, an absolutely amazing, soft, smooth, and again, something which I think is a little bit different to what you've had before. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome a very special friend and guest on set. Now, Pete Badenhorst is the acclaimed winemaker at Nederburg, and he's an expert on Chenin Blanc. And I've asked him to join me for this live tasting on the Chenin Blanc cask finish. Peter, welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Andy.
So, Peter, thanks for joining me. Maybe you can share a kind of a top-line intro to Chenin Blanc with me and also with our consumers who are out there, because I'm a big fan of Chenin Blanc, but I'm a drinker. I don't know too much about the cultivar itself.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. It's an absolute honor to spend time with you. Like you said, we've been friends for quite some time now, and I really look up to you and what you've achieved over your career, and just following you. And it's a big honor, and thank you for the invitation. So with that said, yeah, I think Chenin Blanc in South Africa is, look, I've called it our Swiss Army knife of the South African wine industry. It is so versatile, and it's got an extremely long history. It was definitely one of the first cultivars that was brought over to South Africa back in the 1600s when we started making wines in South Africa. So it really goes back a long time, something like back to 1655. So that is a very long time that we've been making Chenin Blanc in South Africa. One of the things about Chenin Blanc is the fact, over my career that I've made, it is so versatile. I've made sparkling wines with it. I've made easy drinking Chenin Blancs, your fresh and fruity, up to your Chenin Blancs that's barrel aged, of course. And then even I've made noble late harvest with Chenin Blanc. So that's why, like I said, I call it the Swiss Army knife of the South African wine industry and in terms of the cultivar. Now, about 20% or 18.6% of the total vineyard plantings in South Africa is Chenin Blanc. So it is by far the biggest single cultivar in South Africa.
Sure.
So that's why Chenin Blanc is so close to my heart, and why I really enjoy making wines with Chenin Blanc.
Okay. Yeah, I find it an incredible wine for summer. Again, being a drinker, I tend to move between red wines in the winter when it's cold and wet in the Cape, and white wines in the summer when we've got the hot temperatures which we have. And I just love Chenin Blanc as a wine cultivar. So to have the opportunity to work with it in this particular sense on making a whiskey finished in Chenin casks was something which I'd wanted to do, and we've now got round to doing it. So
it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, maybe we can have a taste of this little gem.
Oh, so much looking forward to this.
Yeah. So let's just crack the cork on that one. Now, Peter, when I talk to people about tasting whiskey, I always tell them there's a big difference between tasting whiskey and drinking whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of tasting, it's all about getting to know the flavors of the particular whiskey. So normally I would suggest when we taste, it's just a little dash of water to open up the whiskey itself, let you experience everything which is going on. When you drink whiskey, I always tell people there is no right or wrong way. It's how you enjoy it. So if it is a hot day in the Cape and you want a long glass full of ice, your favorite whiskey and a mixer of your choice, absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think the whole kind of perception that whiskey is this masculine, intense drink which can only be consumed by older people in tumblers with just a block of ice or a dash of water, that really is just a myth. Whiskey is there for every demographic. It's there for all the sexes, and also not necessarily, in fact, totally not just older people. No. And we find that in South Africa that our big consumer group is around about that 25 to 45 age group. Are they? Yep. Well, I don't fall into that. I don't fall into that anymore. But it's still great. So yeah, if we look at this one, you see on the color, because we used older casks, and again for our consumers out there, our supporters, This is totally natural color,
Yeah.
and it's non-chill filtered. So you might find that if you do drop a little block of ice or two in there, that there might be a slight haziness comes to it.
Yeah.
We did bottle at 46.3, so that should limit the amount of haziness. But on the color, you can see it's got this vibrant gold, kind of a sunset in spring color.
Oh, for sure. It reminds me a bit of the Noble Late Harvest that we also make with the Chenin Blanc.
Yeah,
also got that deep golden, beautiful hue.
Now I'm just going to put a dash of water onto mine just to open it up. I'll let you do the same. You can do your own. And on the nose, now that it's opened up, I'm getting kind of lemon cream biscuits, hay-like, tropical fruits.
Yeah, and again, the idea of marrying this or bringing Chenin Blanc in, and I get a lot of those similar notes. Like you said, South Africa is has this warm weather, so our Chenin Blancs have the opportunity to fully ripen and make big Chenin. So, yeah, kudos for bringing that up.
I also get a little bit of rooibos coming through with maybe some subtle honeyed sweetness. That could obviously come from the American oak as well.
Yeah.
That little bit of natural sweetness coming through. I think another big thing to remember for our consumers and our supporters out there too is that, when I mention tasting notes, it really is just to point you in a direction.
Yes.
You might experience something totally different to me. It doesn't make me right, you wrong, or vice versa.
It's about your background.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It's that library which is in your mind, yes, which will take you to what you can actually, couple to what you're smelling.
Yeah. We've got the same in the wine industry. As a winemaker, everything that you've said up to now makes so much sense. And like you said about that tasting notes, it is our interpretation as winemakers that you impart on or that you write down. But people need to make up and use their own vocabulary and their own library. That's so spot on, Andy.
Okay, so let's have a little taste of this one and see what we come up with then. I'm sure I heard that plane. It's already gone over.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Now, I'm getting on this one golden delicious apples, candied pineapple, a little bit of subtle pepper, and a zestiness there as well. And it's lingering. It's soft, spicy, it's warm.
But it's so balanced. It is so soft, and like you said, in the beginning you get some of those notes from the American oak, and then it just eases into the sort of the spice.
And tell me, Peter, can you pick up what we try to do here? Can you pick up some of those Chenin notes in this?
For sure. That's like I said. I mean, it makes perfect sense. The those ripe fruits coming through from the beautiful South African sun and the heat on those grapes, and then what that imparts on this one. I get those notes very similar to that on the Chenins that I've made through my career. For me, this is a perfect match. It is an absolute spot-on pairing.
And remember, what we're trying to do as well when we talk about cask finishes, the whole idea of a cask finish is to give you an idea of what was previously in that cask.
For sure.
It's not for the contents of that cask to overpower and become the main player. So it's, when we talk about cask finishes, it's not always the easiest thing to do because, some casks can take the flavor of the whiskies very quickly. So you've always got to be looking into it. But I think we've got it right here that you've got those hints of the Chenin, but it's still out and out a nice whiskey.
It's a whiskey. It's not about, the Chenin is just a building block in the background, and as is the barrels and the casks. Like I said, we have exactly the same in the wine industry. Everything you do needs to just add in the background and just play a role in the background. It shouldn't be the leading, the whiskey, the original raw material that you start with. That's the main drive. That's where you come in, just adding notes to that.
Do you think this is something which maybe a white wine drinker could get to enjoy in summer? Easy. Long glass, lots of ice?
Easily. and again, it's what's nice for me about this relationship between the wine and the whiskey. It's special, and I think people who appreciate whiskies can also appreciate, and the effort that goes into them can surely appreciate the efforts of wines and what we've put into the making, and especially those Chenins that we age in barrel, because it's a labor of love. And can you imagine just the faith that you have in putting something in a barrel and I, in my career, I go max up to 2 years. You go up to 6 years. That's a labor of love. And the faith that you have in what you've done to make sure that that it will go the 6 years. That's amazing. And so your classic whiskey drinker and who understand the effort that goes into that will also enjoy your Chenin Blancs, Chenin Blanc wines, for that matter, yes.
Well, Peter, thanks so much for joining me today. What a pleasure to share the stage with you. You can take it with you if you want to.
Andy,
Peter,
thank you so
thanks
much.
very much.
You're a legend, and I really appreciate what you've done, and kudos. You've done a brilliant job. Thanks for the time.
Thanks.
Have a nice. Good luck with the sale.
Thank you. Okay, so that is the quick intro on the whiskey, and thank you, Peter, for, I mean, I know Peter, I've known him for many years, and to be perfectly honest, Peter could have talked the whole day about Chenin Blanc and the wines for you, so I really appreciate him taking the effort and the time for coming through and sharing it with us. So now it's time for some Q&A, some questions and answers. We're looking at now, okay, we've still got about 40 minutes or so before the move to the live sale. So yeah, if you have any questions at all about this release or the whiskey making process or anything whiskey related, please send your questions by clicking on the Ask Andy tab on the left of the screen, or by tweeting 3 Ships or at the Whiskey Maker. Obviously, I won't pick up your tweets now, but if it's something which I don't get to, I will get back to you later on. So, okay, the questions are starting to come in, and hey, Mark is always there on the ball. Hi, Mark. Great to have you online with us again. I know we chatted briefly last night, and you were a bit worried. Is the plan to add a coffee malt permanently to the lineup? We don't normally talk about way into the future, Mark, but I don't think so at this stage. It was something I tried in 2016. Very happy with what's happened and how it's come out, but not in the foreseeable future. Maybe the response to this says people enjoy this style, a little bit lighter. The next question from Vernon talks about, does this have some peat in it? Personally, I would say if you've tasted the previous Masters collections, you are not going to get peat in this one. The barley we used was very lightly peated, and the process of using column distillation against pot distillation, you anyway tend to lose the peatiness if there was any in there. So for Mark, at this stage, not permanent, but I kind of like what's happened here, so maybe going forward. And for Vernon, I think if you're looking for a peat monster, this is probably not the one for you. Okay, the next question from Tommy says, is this a single malt or a blend? It's actually neither, Tommy, and I just mentioned it there quickly. In South Africa, we have 3 legislations for what is whiskey. There's a legislation for what is malt whiskey, there's a legislation for what is blended whiskey, and there's a legislation for what is whiskey. And they all fit under the same category, which is whiskey. Now, because I've taken a malted barley, and I've taken that mash, fermented it, but then I've distilled it in a column still. Hence the word coffee malt, because the guy who invented the column still way back in 1830 was a guy called Aeneas Coffey from Ireland. And he created that to make a lighter style spirit than the typical malts which were being produced. But back to your question, so taking that malted barley, if I'd have put it into the pots, it would have been a single malt. If I'd have taken what I've got now and distilled it in the pots and then put some grain whiskey with it, which was distilled in the column, then it would have been a blend. But because I've taken that malted barley, I've put it through the column still to create something which is totally different to what we've produced before. This then falls into the whiskey category. So I hope that answers the question. Drop me a line, you normally do sometimes. Drop me a line if it's not clear, and I'll try to explain it again. But it is pretty simple, those three categories. It's not a malt whiskey because it's actually been distilled in the column still and not the copper pot stills. It's not a blended whiskey because there's no grain added to it. But it's a whiskey because it's a malted barley mash which has been fermented and then distilled in a column still. Anonymous, hi, don't you want to talk to me with your name? 6 years in total, what are the breakdown, the cask used and the final finishing cask duration? So yes, it was 4 years in older American oak, and then it was moved across into seasoned Chenin casks for a period of 2 years. Another anonymous, what are the differences that will be noticeable between the column and pot distillation process? Well, normally if you take malt whiskey, the malt when distilled in a pot still has a very deep complexity. And also then, if you have a peated barley, that peat will continue through into the final product. With this one being a unpeated barley and going through the column still, you'll find it lighter in style. And what we talked about with the tasting notes, the fact that it's gone into Chenin casks has now added that, the fruitiness, the candied pineapple is really coming through. And this, as we've used with the hashtag summer uncorked, I think you'll find that this is a much lighter styled, easier drinking whiskey than what we've had from our previous pot distilled Master's Collection releases, and also some of the blends as well, which have tended to have a very high pot still component. Remember, with the Master's Collection, it is about trying to bring unique things, different things to you as well. So as in the previous ones, I remember the Oloroso, one of my top-on favorites, but didn't suit everybody because of the powerfulness, the complexity of the whiskey, where I really think that anybody who tries this one is going to enjoy it because it is bringing you a much more, let's say, relaxed experience. Okay, question from Derek. Congrats on your 7th release of the Masters Collection. Extremely proud of the legacy you are creating. Trust it will continue in the years to come. Thank you, Derek. I appreciate that and humbled by the kind words. Mark again, with it being a coffee malt, how is it categorized? It's not a single malt, it's not a blend, so would it then be classified as a single grain whiskey? In our legislation, Mark, as I've just mentioned to you, there isn't a single grain category or a grain whiskey category. There's a malt whiskey category for malted barley, which is distilled in copper pot stills. There is a blend category, which is for malt whiskey and anything which comes out of the whiskey category. And then there is the whiskey category, which this falls into because it is not malt distilled in a pot still. So I suppose you could call it technically a single grain, but when we refer to grain, we normally refer to anything other than malted barley. So in that case, I would say this is a straight whiskey, which comes from a malted barley mash, which is then finished in the Chenin casks. Charles M. asked the question, why do you use American oak first before using the Chenin Blanc casks after? Okay, well, American oak, if you look at the whiskey industry, approximately 90 to 95% of all of the wood which is used comes out of the American whiskey bourbon industry. Varying ages, so you can go, for example, a whiskey or a cask which is just being used to mature bourbon, and you can bring that cask in and then you get lots of those sweet vanilla flavors. Or you can say, okay, I want a cask which has been filled a couple of times after that before I purchase it. So you're getting less and less of that in-your-face sweetness, spiciness. So this one I would say has been aged for the first 4 years in casks ranging from 2 to 4 fills, and then taken across into those seasoned Chenin casks, just to add that extra dimension of flavor for that final 2 years. So the reason we use an American cask first is that is the traditional vessel of choice for maturing whiskey. D'Andre Smith, any chance for a master's collection using Japanese casks in the future? Interesting one. Casks at the moment are difficult to get from anywhere. So I would imagine Japan, having a shortage of whiskey themselves, is pretty tight on their Japanese wood. But yeah, very interesting thought. Another question from Derek. Andy, considering previous releases, why the low 46%? Chenin Blanc forward or something else? Derek, I think with this one, just for the simpleness of the flavors, the fact that they really blend together very nicely, I think 46.3 is a kind of a sweet spot for this. I think taking it higher in alcohol, you might have had a little bit more alcohol burn than what you get with some of those complex malts. So I just think this is a totally out and out easy drinker, let's put it that way. One of those whiskeys you're going to sit down with and you're going to come home, you're going to enjoy it, and it's something in it which you can talk about, but it's not going to be something you're going to have to sit and look at for 2 or 3 hours and nose and take down and nose and take down. So invite some friends over, open that bottle, take the cork out, and don't worry if the cork doesn't come back as long as there's enough of you to make sure it's done responsibly. Why is the Chenin Blanc a summer-inspired release? Sure. From Mark. Oh no, that's the next question is Mark. Chenin Blanc, a summer-inspired release. Well, I think in South Africa, as I mentioned earlier, typically I drink white wine in summer, red wine in winter. We're moving into our summer now, so my fridge is tending to have more and more white wines in. Chenin is one of my favorites. It's also something which our marketing team came to me a couple of years ago now and said, listen, would you or could you look at something like that? And I mean, it was a great challenge to try and be able to do that. So for Merrill and the team in the background, I'm so glad that we've managed to give you this summer-inspired release, hence the hashtag Summer Uncorked. I really think it falls into that line. Mark Backhouse asks, is there a reason why you released a 6-year-old? Well, I think so far, if you look at the Masters collection, we're into the 7th year, we haven't had the same vintage twice. This particular one, Mark, I don't think it was going to benefit. Being a column malt, being a grain, and then putting it into a light style cask finish like the Chenin, I don't think this would have benefited by aging to 10, 12, and even older. I think this is perfectly rounded and it's ready to go at 6 years old. Remember, old is not always the best. I always like to say the correlation between old or age and whiskey tends to be the price. The older you go, the more expensive they become because of the aging process, the angel share, etc. I just think this one, 2 years in those Chenin casks, on top of being that column distilled malt background, has given us the perfect package for this particular release. Derek, Andy, the legend, thank you, Derek. The Chenin Blanc cask, missed the cask info, used once or several times before, being used as a whiskey finish. This comes straight from being seasoned Chenin, so probably used once for Chenin, if I'm not mistaken. I just asked for it to have a slight rinse on it. I wasn't taking something which was, sat with all the Chenin moored in the bottom of the cask, so I asked for a light rinse of that, but I still felt there was enough in the wood, and it's definitely extracted through into the whiskey. Okay, Anonymous asks, what is the difference between chill-filtered and un-chill-filtered whiskey? Up until possibly 20 years ago, all whiskey used to be chill-filtered. And it really went about that aesthetic experience of visually having this incredibly clear and bright product inside a bottle. And then people started to question the fact that it was being chill filtered, because what happens when you chill filter is there are certain flavor congeners, and they, when they get cold, create a little bit of haze in the bottle. So by chill filtering, you then remove those congeners and you leave yourself with a really crystal clear bottle of whiskey, regardless of temperature. But now by taking them out, you're actually affecting the flavor of the whiskey. So more and more as time has gone by, especially when it comes to limited releases or older products, the tendency is to go non-chill filtered. Therefore, you are not chilling the whiskey down. Those flavor congeners are staying in liquid form. They're not forming as a haze. And you are not then removing them by the filtration process. So all in all, by not chill filtering, you are leaving more of the natural flavor inside the whiskey. Okay, any more questions coming in? Okay, while we're waiting for a few more questions, just remember to make sure that you're registered on the site. The live sale is going forward in 30 minutes from now. And make sure you're there, because remember, these are the first 400 bottles. They're numbered 1 to 400. Lots of people are going to be gunning for their favorite number, which they've probably had in the last 6 Masters collections if they've been very fortunate. So make sure that you are registered and that you're ready to go once this goes live at 12 o'clock into the sales phase of the experience. Question here, how does this compare to the 3 Ships 10-year-old single malt? The 3 Ships 10-year-old single malt it has got some peated barley in there, so there's a little bit more smokiness comes through into the 10-year-old single malt. What we try to do with all of our whiskies is to create something which is slightly different, a voyage in every bottle, if you wanted to use that kind of terminology. And I think with this one, you'll find it's lighter in style. It doesn't have that peatiness, doesn't have that ashy, deep smokiness which the 10-year has. The 10-year might also, because we use a small amount of fresh American oak in there, might have a little bit more of a sweetness coming through into it, where this to me is a little bit more fruity. So it would be good to put the two together. Actually, interesting enough, this evening, at 9 o'clock this evening, so I'm not going to be able to enjoy too much of my release today, but at 9 o'clock this evening, I'm going live in the UK on a vertical tasting of the previous 6 of the Masters collection. One of our big supporters in the UK has opened up his private collection and put the previous 6 together for 15 friends of his. And I will be leading that tasting this evening. So it will be interesting to go back and actually see them all together. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the Chenin to slot in at the end, but I do, and I'll give them an idea of what to expect from the Chenin too. So I think I will also notice tonight, back to the 10-year-old and the comparison, that the idea is to create that different journey in every release which we do. There's a huge trend with pairing nowadays. A question from Nicole. Does this whiskey lend itself to any sort of pairing? I would look at your smoked hams, your really summery kind of cheese board, the softer cheeses, I would think. Possibly a cheddar or a gouda might go with this one too. But I think in general, it would be nice with a normal summer board of breads, cheeses, and some thinly sliced hams. Maybe even a little bit of biltong as well with this. Okay. Now I've got the legend of tasting and pairings. Derek asking me the question. For tasting pairing purposes, one would like to work on a complementing liquid, i.e. Chenin Blanc. Can you disclose the cask origin for that purpose? Derek, you've been very naughty. You know that we don't do that, whether it's the Pinotage, the Shiraz. We like to keep our source of the wine cask to ourselves. It just means, maybe you like the wine too much and that's all you drink, or you don't like the wine and then you think that our whiskey isn't worth buying. So it's always that little bit of information which we don't share. Adam asked the question, how does the Chenin Blanc finish compare to the Pinotage and Shiraz finishes that came before in the Masters collection? Adam, I think the obvious one is we're looking at two red wine finishes there. The Pinotage being the South African, uniquely South African grape varietal, and Shiraz being another red wine varietal. Both of those two brought a lot of the red berry fruit, a lot of spiciness in terms of the Shiraz, in terms of the Pinotage, more earthy, a kind of a farmyard experience, where the Chenin is more, let's say, your tropical fruit, your pineapple, your banana, your apples, all of those fruits which are coming through in this one. So yes, there is a difference, apart from the fact it's red and white wines. The reds did bring more of a deeper red, very spicy farmyard experience. Charles M., do you have a personal favorite in the Masters collection? Hi. It's like asking me which of my two twins is my favorite child. All depends on the day. Listen, I have a very soft spot for the Pinotage cask finish. That is something which is uniquely South African. South African whiskey finished in a South African grape varietal cask. But also I enjoy, I think a lot of people say they enjoy the PX cask, but that is now so difficult to find because we only did 800 bottles at that first release which we did. But if it's not for the Pinotage, I enjoyed the Fino cask finish, which was a blend, and quite a high blend, if I remember correctly, ran about a 40% malt, 60% grain ratio, which is very high, but the Fino gave a very nice finish. So yeah, it's depending on the mood, but probably between the Pinotage and the Fino at this stage. I released myself, I've got to sit down and experience this one with some friends, but I can already see that, this is definitely going to be one of those whiskies where I'm going to need more than one bottle in my collection. What is the most important, question from Tian, what is the most important thing that you've learned during your expansive career? Wow, Tian. 38 years, so it is a long time. My memory doesn't go back that far. But yeah, I think it's patience. I think it's, to be humble about what putting these products together can do for you. And also having the 3 Ds, dedication, determination, discipline. Because, we just released now the Millennium a few months ago. That was a concept which I came up with on the eve of the Millennium, 2000, the year 2000, only released in 2021. So, I suppose I've kind of committed myself to this like I've committed myself to most things in life. So yeah, commitment, the 3 Ds, patience, all of them, if you've got them, can help you go a while with making whiskey. And obviously, never forget that you're not too old to learn. There's things I did in the first few years when I started making whiskey, which I still believe to this day, if anybody else had known anything about making whiskey then, I would have probably been fired in the first 6 months. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, but don't make them again. Okay, so learn from what you've done wrong and move forward with that. Gustav, the JSD in Wellington must get very hot in summer. How does that influence the whiskies that get distilled there? You're right, Wellington is quite a hot place in summer. We get temperatures on a regular basis into the 40s degrees centigrade, not Fahrenheit, 40 degrees centigrade. In terms of the distillation, not too much. Fermentation, yes, we have to temperature control our fermentations to make sure that our yeast is in a, let's say, in an environment where it is comfortable, where it operates at its optimum performance. So the fermentations are very important. And as I mentioned earlier, when it comes into maturation, you know, things just happen a lot quicker in in a warmer climate country. We're losing on average between 4 and 5% per year to the Angel share. That is, if you walk into our maturation stores in Wellington and you take a deep breath, you will immediately understand what the Angel share is. It's this intense flavor of the alcohol leaving the cask and rising to the atmosphere. So we are losing between 4.5%, 5% per year. In Scotland and the colder northern hemisphere climates, you're tending to lose around about 1.5% to 2%. So it means during maturation, that interaction between the wood, the cask, and the atmosphere is just happening at a far quicker rate. So we can't generally distill a whiskey, ferment it, put it into wood and forget about it. We tend to find that between 8 and 10 years, the wood starts to become a little bit tired, and if we want to take a whiskey to a really old age, then we might have to change the cask a few times during that maturation process. Moving on to a Chardonnay lover. Hi Andy, I know you don't like to lay out your cards, but can we expect a Chardonnay cask finish Masters collection in the future? We've done 2 reds. There's nothing to say that going into the future, we won't add another white to the collection as well. We've got to keep coming up with something which is new. That was a commitment. It's not going to be easy as we go forward. I remember Mark, previous question asked him about the 6 years old. It is possible that we might have to start hitting the same numbers in terms of years, but we can always keep looking for interesting finishes or distillation techniques to give us something different. Sasha, how did the idea of the Masters Collection come about? Hey, I don't know if that's Sasha or if that's somebody tweeting under Sasha's name. 2015. In 2011, the distillery turned 125 years old. The James Sedgwick Distillery was established in 1886 by the Sedgwick family. And in 2011, we had a function at the distillery where the press were invited and several whiskey bloggers who came to the distillery. Most of them who still remain very good friends to this day. And whilst we were there, we talked whiskey and we showed the maturation cellars, and one particular cellar in particular, which is known as My Secret Cellar or Store 13. And after that, what happened was that one of our bloggers back then decided that why aren't we releasing some of this very interesting whiskey which I had in the secret cellar? And I said, because at this stage it's not in the plan, it's not there. So this gentleman decided to take it on himself to create a social media campaign under the hashtag Distill, Are You Listening? And he didn't just target Distill, Are You Listening? We had a new CEO who just joined the business, Richard Rushton at that time. And we had an amazing brand manager marketing manager called Liesl Dippener. And Richard was getting bombarded by this social media campaign, and he turned to Liesl, he says, I don't care what it takes, you have 3 months to get something out there into the market. And that was the birth of the Masters Collection in 2015. It was a single cask. It was turned around in just over 3 months' time. It was the only one of the Masters Collection which went into a screw-top bottle because we didn't have time to develop a bottle which would take a cork. So yes, actually it all started through a social media campaign from a particular blogger who used that hashtag, Distill, Are You Listening? Megan asks, what makes a whiskey collectible? How big is your collection at home? I think what makes a whiskey collectible is how many bottles are available. Is it something different? Is it unique? Is it going to be a core release? In other words, can I get it next year, or is it something I must get now? And also, you know, the number of bottles, the rarity of that release as well. All of that can contribute to, is the whiskey collectible? Now, I am also a member or an honorary member of a group of people called the Whiskey Pigs. And their motto is that all the whiskey must be drunk. So I'm a firm believer in that. I have a reasonable amount of bottles in my collection, but the majority are open. Somebody once said to me that two closed bottles next to each other, they both taste the same. So I think bear that in mind too. And that's why I think if you are a collector, it's always interesting and probably advisable in days like this to maybe purchase two. And, you know, you have one for your collection and one for when you want to drink. And if you like it, then hope that you still in line to get before they are sold out. I think this is 2,840 bottles in total. And just a quick reminder on the sales format. The online sale will begin at 12 o'clock, so we're looking at 14 minutes from now. You can either access it by opening the 3 Ships Whisky sale page or on a new page in your browser. You can wait to be redirected to the sales page from this site at 12 o'clock sharp. So if possible, if you're looking for a specific number, I'd recommend opening a new page in your browser so you can familiarize yourself before the sale starts. And as I mentioned, this year's special release is selling at $749.95, and you will need your credit card to complete your purchase. Now, also just some interesting things. We're going live with this today. Normally it's around 2 weeks or so before the whiskey then becomes available to general public. In this case, because, and I mean, somebody tell me a business which hasn't had challenges in the last 18 months or so since coming out of the pandemic. You know, and we have also had challenges with this particular release. I always say my part, which is getting the whiskey ready, is the easiest. That's been lying there for, in this case, 6 years. But to get boxes, cartons, corks, closures, labels, everything here in this crazy supply chain world at the moment isn't always easy. So we're going live with the first 400 bottles today. We will then be going live via the distillery e-commerce site, the online site of the distillery, from the 15th of December. And then from the 15th of January, we will be featuring in some of the specialist whiskey retailer shops. So I don't know if I would wait until the 15th of Jan. Yes, obviously they will make some purchases, but by that time there may not be the chance to reorder. So I would look at either today or when the distillery comes online on the 15th of December, if you still want it before Christmas. And then obviously if you don't want to do all that effort and you just want to walk into your favorite whiskey retailer, specialist retailer, then you might find it from the 15th of January. Also, if you haven't done so already, don't forget, please register for the sale right now by clicking on the register for sale icon on the left-hand side of the screen, and that will direct you to the registration site. So a question coming in now from Mpumi. In terms of caliber, would you say South African whiskey can go toe-to-toe with international whiskies? That's an interesting question, because one of our biggest challenges is not necessarily making world-class whiskey anymore, and I'm not meaning that with any form of arrogance at all. The world is telling us through international competitions and the amount of awards which 3 Ships and our sister whiskey Baines have been awarded. The rest of the world is telling us that South Africa is making good whiskey. The perception in this country is that good whiskey only comes from Scotland, Ireland, United States, Japan. So the biggest challenge we have is to break that perception down, to try and help convince people that the quality of our whiskey in South Africa is of a standard which can compete on the same and sit on the same shelf as of the international whiskies which are out there. Richard says, how does Chenin Blanc Cask finish stack up to other whiskies in the 3 Ships range? which other variant is most similar to, or which other variant is it the most similar to? Richard, whiskey, as we know, is incredibly subjective. I think the good thing here is to probably try them. I don't believe that one person's view on how good a whiskey is should influence you. I think you should always go out there and try them. In terms of the Three Ships range, you're looking at the Three Ships Select, which is an easy drinking, very mixable whiskey which is out there. You're looking at the 5-year-old, which has got a little bit more of that smokiness, complexity, peatiness coming through, and you've then got the 10-year-old. Those are the three core range whiskies. I think this one is totally different, and this one definitely fits into that Master's Collection style. So, yeah, you're going to be finding something here which is different to any of the three which are in the range, but something which I think will appeal to most of the people who can enjoy the Three Ships range of whiskies. Mornay asks, understand you don't want to disclose the wine from where the Chenin casks come from, but can you disclose the region? Example, Stellenbosch, Paul, etc. Okay, I'll give you a bit of a hint there. It's from the winelands. Okay, so I hope that helps you there, Mornay. Anonymous. The whiskey is only 6 years old. Any specific reason for not aging it longer? Yeah, I think we touched on this earlier, but I'll repeat it for you. In this particular case, in the Masters Collection so far, we've looked at pretty much every year as a different, all of the 7 have now got different ages. In terms of this particular one, it was a 4-year-old whiskey when I managed to get hold of the Chenin casks. The style of the Chenin I saw coming into the whiskey quite quickly. Therefore, there was no need for the whiskey to age any more than 6 years old. Age is not a determining factor in terms of quality. Please don't think that. Some of the older aged whiskies are exceptional, but you can also get older whiskies which are past their prime. Pretty much like ourselves as humans, we don't all peak at 65. Some of us prefer that 30-year-old bracket. So this one is a 6-year-old. It's younger, but that doesn't take anything away from the experience you're going to have when you purchase and try this whiskey, either with yourself, alone, or with friends. Dylan is asking, guide us through the perfect way of enjoying the 6-year-old Chenin Blanc cask finish. I'll take you through my perfect way, Dylan, and that would be how I've poured it there. Small, maybe a 50 ml, a double shot, into a nice glass like this. If I'm tasting it, I'll probably go more for a Glencairn style glass. But if I'm just sitting down enjoying it, I love the tumbler glass like this one. I would nose it. I might even have a small little sip of it at its full strength. But really for me to enjoy it, I would not pour ice in. I believe very strongly that ice pulls in the flavor of the whiskey. So by doing that, it's probably going to appear to be softer, smoother, easier to drink. But I like to experience the flavors of the whiskey. So I would probably use, like I did here, just a dash of chilled water. No ice. Let that water, there's a small little chemical reaction takes place with the water and the spirit, which generates a little bit of heat itself, and that then drives the flavors to the nose of the glass. That's how I enjoy it, because I like to combine not just drinking. I like to enjoy the nose. I like to close my eyes, let it take me to certain experiences, places, and then obviously at the end you can have that little sip. And that's how I enjoy my perfect way of the Chenin Blanc cask finish. Charles, tell us about some of the Three Ships Awards from this year. Okay, the competitions and the whiskey shows are just starting to get back online, but the big one of this year for Three Ships was definitely the Michelangelo International Spirits Competition, where the Three Ships 5-year-old, which is my personal favorite in the core range, the Three Ships 5-year-old walked away with the whiskey trophy for best whiskey at show. Again, the Michelangelo International Spirits Awards, although held in South Africa, is made up of international judges. Everything is tasted blind, and the fact that they thought that a 5-year-old was the best whiskey at show, and it's a blend against single malts or single grains. It was a blended whiskey. The fact that that was given the overall trophy for best at show was an amazing feat for us. And I think that, again, goes to, if you're going to, don't judge whiskey, don't drink with your eyes. A lot of us drink with our eyes. What the label tells us, we expect, and we perceive that is what is there. Rather, if you can, take away the labels, do what I've done, close your eyes, experience it, and then decide if you like it or you don't like it. Okay, we've got just 5 minutes to go, a couple of questions still coming in. What are your thoughts on those whiskey tumblers that don't have a flat bottom? Do they really help bring out flavor? The Glencairn doesn't have the flat bottom, but it's also got the nose of the glass is tighter, so I would say that helps to bring out the flavor because it concentrates the flavors then to a small portion, where this one, you can still get flavor escaping around the glass, but for ease of drinking, I would use the tumbler. If I was in a serious tasting or really wanting to get down to the roots of the product, then I would probably look at something like the Glencairn, which has then the nose of the glass which tightens, or the tulip wine glass, exactly the same. I also believe in that one that dash of water helps to bring out the flavor as well. Okay, so it's now almost time for the online sale to begin. And I think history's told us that, things happen pretty hectic now. So make sure you're registered and you're ready to select your preferred number bottle when it goes live. To buy, you'll need to move to the 3 Ships Whisky sale page or open a separate tab for the sales page and keep watching here. From past years, we know this is a super busy time for everyone, clamoring to get their hands on a bottle, so don't say you weren't warned. Also on this particular release, please, and listen to this one carefully, there will be no signed bottles on what is on the shelf. The majority of the consumer wants the bottle in the box, out to them as quick as possible. So that's the priority for the team today. It's to get it off the shelf, into the box, and out with the courier by latest tomorrow. If you would like a signed bottle, then please purchase after the 15th of December through the distillery's e-commerce site store at the jamessedgwickdistillery.co.za, and I will then, with pleasure, if you put in the comments section, Andy to sign, I will sign anything for you. But I've been told today, no signing, because the priority is to get the bottles out to the customers. Okay, a last question coming in, or a couple of questions coming in. I'll try to answer them quickly. Hi, Andy. Any chance of seeing a Virgin Cask finish in the Masters collection in the future? We did do a little one with a collaboration with a supermarket chain in the past, which was very well received. There's no reason at all why that can't be one of the options for us going forward. The Masters collection is once a year, so we do have in the pipeline already our ideas for the next couple of years. But yeah, anybody got any suggestions at all, throw them into the pot and we'll have a look at them going forward. Remember, you only see what works. A lot of what doesn't work, you don't see. So anything which you send through to us, we will have a look at it. Final question coming in, what is New World Whiskey, and is SA a New World region? New World Whiskey it's a term given to the countries outside of those traditional centuries-old whiskey-producing countries. So Scotland, Ireland, North America would be seen as the traditional countries. New World is more like South Africa, Australia, Sweden, Taiwan, Japan. Those are what's classed as the New World. But at the moment, most of us are starting to create our own kind of region, and everybody's moving to start referring to us as South African whiskey and not necessarily New World. So the sale is about to start now. I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much for joining me on this sunny morning here in Cape Town. Thanks for your support. Thanks for all the interesting questions. And until we meet at the next Masters Collection, if not before, I'm Andy Watts signing out for now. Cheers and thank you.